So it would appear that James Laurinaitis is pretty good at this recruiting thing. James Laurinaitis landed another linebacker in Ohio State's 2025 recruiting class, still the number one class in the country. It's been pretty busy over the past week, the number one class in the country, 23 commits, a couple hits, a couple of misses. We'll get into that on a later pod down the road here when we recap what's been a explosive start to July for Ohio State football recruiting, but just recruiting around the country. But the latest addition to its 2025 recruiting class, Riley Pettijohn from McKinney, Texas, the number 31 player, number 4 linebacker in the country. Andrew, just some fun facts for you. The last time Ohio State landed a 5-star cornerback before it got Devin Sanchez was Jeff Okudah in the 2017 class. He was from Texas. The last time Ohio State landed a 5-star linebacker before they got Riley Pettijohn this past weekend was Baron Browning in the 2017 class. He also was from Texas, and now they're hitting that back up to kind of end some of these droughts here. How big of a deal is it for Ohio State getting Riley?
Huge. I think when you look at Riley, I mean, he's the number 31 overall player, the number 4 linebacker, the number 9 player out of Texas. I will get into the recruiting aspect of Laurinaitis and the line, but like the whole gamut in a minute. As a player, Riley Pettijohn is a really darn good football player. He's somebody who's not going to wow you with his size. He doesn't have this like 6'3", 230 kind of mold. Like, he's not Sonny Styles. He's not, some of that, maybe even the other linebackers that they were recruiting, but that's not his game. And I think that that's fine. He's not maybe your more traditional. He is definitely this new age linebacker. I think James Laurinaitis kind of joked in the spring that the linebackers he's recruiting are way more athletic than he was. Well, this is it. Like Riley Pettijohn, in April, he ran a 10.77 40-yard dash. This guy can move a little bit because when you're thinking about him, he's listed at 6'1.5", 215. That's impressive, right? That is a really impressive linebacker. So now you are adding him to a defense or to a recruiting class that has Eli Lee, that has TJ Alford, and now you add in Pettijohn. That's really impressive. That's a really, really solid group. You look at some of his high school numbers, you look at the things that, really kind of stick out to you at that high school level. The tackles are there. You see the explosiveness. The number one thing, or one of the number one things that I look for on defense, is aggressiveness. You see that jumps off the page immediately. This is a really, really good football player, and Ohio State did a really good job of recruiting him. This was not an easy recruitment. This was not an easy thing for James Laurinaitis to win, and we'll get to that, I'm sure, in a second. But this was a big deal, and I think it's very impressive. And James Laurinaitis deserves a heck of a lot of credit for going into Texas, pulling Riley Pettijohn out, because now your linebacker room is set. They wanted 3 linebackers in this class. Now you have it. You have Pettijohn, you have Alford, you have Lee. You're good. Now you go into retention mode. Now you kind of have to bat away all these other schools, the Florida schools that are going to try to pick at TJ Alford. You got to bat them away. And, the Texas and the USCs, the schools down, those schools that are going to try to keep poking at Riley Pettijohn, you kind of got to bat them away. But it's a lot easier to retain someone than it is to try to flip someone or try to get someone to commit to you in the first place. And Ohio State has that first step on lock.
TJ Alford's the only one of these guys who still has an official visit scheduled this fall. He's headed to Florida State on September 14th. Eli Lee, obviously, is from their backyard. I mean, we've talked about this, Andrew, and what the potential of James Laurinaitis as a recruiter and as a talent developer, what that could look like. We're going to see the talent development part show up on the field this year. What does Sonny Styles look like? What does CJ Hicks look like? What does Gay Powers look like? What does Arvell Reese look like? We can continue to go down the line. Is that room going to be ready to compete for a team that defensively, it's the only question really, is what are the linebackers going to look like? The recruiting part of it, I think James Laurinaitis just answered that question. You just mentioned Riley Pettijohn is the number 31 player, number 4 linebacker in the country. TJ Alford's the number 48 player, number 5 linebacker in the country. That kid's from Texas and that kid's from Florida. And then obviously Eli Lee, a lower rated guy, 382, number 41 amongst linebackers, but there's reason to believe there's maybe some Tommy Eichenberg upside. This is his first offering. He did in 6 months what the guys who held his title, linebackers coach, failed to do in the first 4 or 5 years of the Ryan Day era of Ohio State football. And that's go get a highly rated guy who didn't grow up in Ohio. And he got 2 of them. plus an Eli Lee, as I just mentioned, has some maybe Tommy Eichenberg upside. We're looking at some of the former players who are now on the staff, and they're probably the most valuable recruiters right now, right? Brian Hartline, what he's doing with the wide receivers, with Tim Walton and what he's doing with the cornerbacks. James Laurinaitis, it seems like it's only the first offering, right? With Brian Hartline, he did it a few times, and it was the consistency. With Tim Walton, it's been consistency. This is only the first offering for James Laurinaitis, and we're going to get into this later on Buckeye Talk. If you're listening, listen to Buckeye Talk wherever you find podcasts. And I've been kind of texting stuff out like this, 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. But Brian Hartline and Tim Walton are the two most valuable recruiters on Ohio State staff. What are the chances that if James Laurinaitis can do this again, right? Can we start to put him up in that category if this is the expectation of linebacker recruiting going forward? If this is his first offering, and then in 2026 we see another offering from that, or he might even have to go bigger than 3 linebackers given what might be leaving the roster over the next 2 or 3 years here.
We can get there. I would caution it to say, well, I've made this kind of point before on this pod. It's a little bit like a watch and a warning. Like when you look at like a tornado watch and a warning. We are kind of at the we're at the less severe level of that. We're like, you have my curiosity. You have my curiosity. Now you have my attention. You don't have my attention yet. You have my curiosity, because this is only one cycle. And while we can praise James Laurinaitis, it's the best linebacker recruiting class in the country. Yep. They have the number 4 and number 5 linebackers committed in this 2025 class. Nobody else has anything close. Jonah Williams, he's the number 1 linebacker. He's choosing, it looks like, between Texas A&M and Oklahoma. Zayden Walker, he's committed to Georgia. Darrell Johnson, he's committed to Alabama. And then you get 2 Ohio State guys. That's really impressive. And, this was a big leap. There was a lot of rumors that, Ohio State was in on some other linebackers, and they kind of were. There was Madden Ferrymo. He had a visit scheduled, which ended up not happening. But that's a big leap to kind of say, we're going to move on and we're going to look at another guy, Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, who is considering Michigan, who is considering Notre Dame. He's kind of considering the schools that Ohio State wants to beat out in the Midwest. And they made a bold choice to really go after Pettijohn, and it worked out. And I think that you have to give James Laurinaitis all the credit in the world. So I think right now we're looking at this going, it's not Hartline level yet. It's not Walton level yet. You did it once. I'm not trying to take anything away from James Laurinaitis, because this is a very impressive class, but you got to do it year after year. And that's what makes Tim Walton so impressive. That's what makes Brian Hartline so impressive, is that, you can backfill a class. I know this class is ridiculous at corner. You have a Devin Sanchez and Naheem Offord. Well, you're filling that up last year where you had an Aaron Scott and a Bryce West. And the year before, you have Jermaine Matthews and Calvin Simpson-Hunt. Like, you're doing this year after year, and that's what makes rooms deep. That's what makes rooms talented, because you could whiff on everybody in 2026, and then all of a sudden you're looking at it going, oh, well, there's a huge gap in that 2026 freshman class. Now we might have to go to the portal. I mean, what if one of these guys transfers out, one of them gets hurt? Like, you're really in a mess if things kind of go wrong. It is kind of crazy how one recruiting class can kind of sink your ship a little bit. But it's really impressive. You have the best linebacker recruiting class in the country. You go into Texas and you pull out Riley Pettijohn. I mean, to a larger sense, like the Ohio State coaching staff, you pull the number 9 player out of Texas and the number 2 player out of Texas. That's really impressive. We said this about Alabama. You don't have to go in there and win Alabama. You don't have to go beat the Tide and beat the Tigers and beat Georgia and beat everybody out down south. You just got to go in there and kind of like in a midnight raid type of fashion, just kind of steal one guy and then get out of there. I mean, to be completely honest, Alabama just did that with Justin Hill, right? Alabama's not going to come in and try to make Ohio and Alabama State. What they did was they came in, they planted their flag on one guy and said, we're going to get him. They got him, and now they're out. And that's kind of what Ohio State needs to be doing with the Texases and with Alabama and, with Florida and with California. And I think that it's a really impressive step for this defense. It's a really impressive step for this linebacker class. It's a really impressive step for James Laurinaitis. And now when you start to map this out, you say, okay, well, you got an ace recruiter in the secondary. You got an ace recruiter at linebacker. Larry Johnson, that's a whole other conversation with everything going on there. But he's still bringing in talent on the defensive line. He's still bringing in really good talent on the defensive line. So you're feeling really good about where you're at all three levels of your defense if you're Ohio State right now.
To be fair, Texas has 9 5-stars, and 4 of them are already committed, and none of them are committed to Texas. In fact,
unbelievable, really.
In fact, 2 of them are committed to Ohio State, and 2 of them are committed to Oregon. So rating Texas seems to be easy right now. But to the point, the bigger point here, the fact that you might have elite recruiters at all 3 levels of your defense, and now Matt Guerrieri is the one, or maybe question mark right now, but he's also got the help of Tim Walton in that situation. The fact that you got elite recruiters at all 3 levels of your defense. That's saying something. But back to the point with Riley Pettijohn and TJ Offer, getting those 2 guys is why it was so valuable and so important to get James Laurinaitis as a full-time assistant, a guy who could go out on the road because he's quickly showing you what he can do. Now the next question is, has he been developing some of the guys on the roster for 2024? And then also, can he continue this? But Ryan Day's got 3 former players on his coaching staff. 2 of them have been home run hires. And the third one, you thought maybe there was a chance he could be a home run hire, and at least so far he's flashing the potential to be a home run hire. Riley Pettijohn, the latest member of Ohio State's recruiting class, number 31 player, the number 4 linebacker out of Texas. Get the text 614-350-3315. I know Andrew just mentioned Justin Hill. There's a few other things that have been happening in the recruiting space. We'll be touching on that here in the next couple of weeks here as we get back on our regular scheduled programming here at Buckeye Talk.